Hey guys, today I just have a real quick lesson for you about lunar and solar calendars. And before we get into that, I just wanted to quickly review the phases of the moon. So here we have a picture, and it's got, the arrows representing sunlight. So the sun would be somewhere over here, and it's shining in this direction. And so just like the Earth, the moon always has a half that is lit up by the sun and a half that is facing away from the sun. So a light side and a dark side. And the moon is constantly revolving around the earth or going around the earth, and it's because of this that the moon appears to change or go through phases. Is because what's actually changing is the amount of the lit up side that we can see. And so we typically will start here with the new moon phase, and then the moon starts to wax or grow. And so the right side of the moon is always what shows up first. So if you notice that the right side's getting bigger, then you know we're waxing. And so we go to a waxing crescent, and then we have the first quarter. So first quarter just means that the entire right-hand side, okay, is lit up. And we go on to the waxing gibbous until we get to a full moon, where you see the entire moon, the lit side of the moon. And then we go into the waning phases. So waning means it's getting smaller. So if you notice that the right side is disappearing, then you know you're in the waning phase until we get to, so waning gibbous takes us to the third quarter. Third quarter means that the right side is now gone, and we only see the left side of the moon. And we keep going to the waning crescent. So just a little bit of the left-hand side is left, and then we go back to the new moon phase. So real quick, before we get into lunar and solar calendars, just need to define a couple words. What does lunar and solar mean? Well, lunar just means that it's something relating to the moon. So for example, if you hear anyone talk about the lunar landing, they're talking about, when humans first landed on the moon. And then solar just is referring to the sun. So for example, if you're talking about a solar eclipse, it means that the light of the sun has been blocked. So here, actually the moon is in this picture. It's covering up the sun completely. And so this light is the sun's light, and then the moon is covering it. So a solar eclipse is when we can no longer see the sun, okay? Solar flares is referring to, like when there's a huge burst of energy coming from the sun. Solar system, refers to the fact that the planets are orbiting around the sun. So, when you hear these words lunar, okay, moon, solar, sun. All right. So just real quick, like I said, let's talk about these lunar and solar calendars. So for thousands of years, people have used the moon's phases to track time with lunar calendars. And there's actually some cultures today that still use a lunar calendar. For example, the Chinese zodiac, it's also called the Chinese lunar calendar. It's an example of this. The Chinese New Year, if you ever notice, it doesn't always start on the same day of our calendar year, and that's because it's a lunar calendar. So it always starts with a new moon phase, and because that does not necessarily line up with our calendar, it can be a different day. Here in America, we use what's called a Gregorian calendar. And it's really a solar calendar because it lasts exactly 365 days. However, we did evolve from a lunar calendar, and that's why we have our months. Because the months actually are reflected upon the moon's phases. Okay, if you remember from some of the earlier videos, the moon takes the moon about 1 month or almost 30 days to completely revolve around the earth. And so because of that, our months have a similar length in time. So lunar calendars, what makes them a lunar calendar is that they always line up with phases of the moon. Okay, and because our Gregorian calendar does not, that's why we are not a lunar calendar, even with our months. So yeah, you'll notice in a big marker if something is a lunar calendar is if the date constantly changes. So, like I said, Chinese zodiac, and there's actually a lot of other cultures around the world that their holidays, they are lined up with specific phases of the moon. And then some civilizations actually would base their calendars off of Earth's orbit around the sun with a solar calendar. So if you remember what we said before about constellations, they will be at different parts of the sky at different times of the year because of Earth's orbit. And so things like this, and also the position of the sun in the sky, changes because of the position of Earth in its orbit. And so these would be tools that they would use to make, or to use a solar calendar. So an example of a solar calendar would be the Aztecs, also the Mayan calendar. It was a 365-day solar cycle. So they were able to kind of track the movement of the sun in the sky, and they realized that every 365 days, the sun would come to the exact same point. And so that's what makes their calendar solar. And again, like I said, our Gregorian calendar is really considered a solar calendar because it does last 365 days. And so therefore it's, when we complete one full orbit around, or, one revolution around the sun. So that's it. Just wanted to, like I said, let you guys know about some of these really interesting tools that, humans have used for thousands of years and that we actually still use today. Bye.